Hello, Clive. How are you today?
I'm as well as I can be.
Fantastic.
I wish I was 21. Is that okay?
Yeah. Do you know what? I'd like to have the knowledge that I have now,
Yeah.
and the wealth I have now, and be 21.
But 21 would be no fun if you knew what you know now.
Oh, that's true. I'd behave very differently. Listen, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about you and your experience. And in the introduction, we heard a lot about you and your work. And let's be honest, not many people get a chance to speak to an audience of 20 million people or so. It doesn't happen very often, right? You must have learnt an awful lot about managing nerves and also about communication from this experience. Can you share a few tips with us?
Fail to prepare and you prepare to fail is the motto of the football commentator. We are research monsters, famously, infamously statted up to the eyeballs. I compile neatly written prep charts full of data and info, which are an attempt to steady any nerves. They are my comfort blankets, my safety nets. If you feel prepared, then a 20 million audience is a stage. It's an opportunity. It's what we wish for, what we do it for. It is a different stage now to 10 years ago. There is a different responsibility, a different jeopardy in the Twitter age. You can end your career in a breath if you make a mistake or say something blinkered or lazy or open to misinterpretation. The high wire that we walk has got even higher in that respect. But most of what is tagged as political correctness is just being sensitive to other people's views or stance or culture. And I've got no problem whatsoever with that. Good communication should be responsible, should be inclusive. You should be welcoming everybody listening in to what you're saying and doing. And when you're talking to a 20 million audience, it is nearly everyone. And I think live sport is one of the last remaining appointments to view events that brings different generations all together to watch together. And so it's a privilege to be a small part of that kind of experience.
I think that's such great advice about preparation. And I had no idea that you called yourselves a research monster. I quite like that. I think that is, so, you're armed with all the information. You probably have more information than you need, I imagine.
Hopefully, you would never use more than about 10% of the information that is in front of you. If there is a skill to what we do, it is the editorial nous to use the information only when it amplifies what the viewer is seeing or adds to what the listener is hearing. I sometimes think with some of my colleagues, no names, there should be a small crawler going across the bottom of the screen with, in quotes, "I've bloody well done this research, so you're bloody well going to hear it." That is not good commentary, not good communication.
Okay, I might have to bleep the language out there. I don't know. We will find out. If it's still in, we know it's all right. If it's not, we know it's not. So I'm going to have to do some name dropping because you've obviously in your book, Not For Me, Clive, which is not an autobiography as such. Each chapter heading is a name drop, isn't it? People like Fergie, Cloughie, Gareth, Sir Bobby Robson. I think they're names that everybody knows, even if they don't follow football. What have you learned getting close to these incredible leaders?
That football is life. I mean, it sounds like one of those naff slogans on the front of a T-shirt, but it is kind of true. Football is one of the great meritocracies. You can buy your way into a football club, but you cannot buy your way into a football team. You've got to be good enough. The men and women that succeed in football are the elite. They are simply extraordinary. And when you're privileged enough to get close to them, you better keep your eyes and ears open because they are special ones, particularly the managers, because I think they are in the same business as me, communication. I mean, you mentioned those names. I've had the two biggest rollickings of my life from Fergie. Cloughie came to my leaving do when I moved on from my very first job. Gareth was at our wedding. I work with the Robson family to this day on staging an annual charity event in Sir Bobby's name. I have got close to them all, and to King Kenny and to Roy Keane and Glenn Hoddle and Graham Souness. I am a wicked name dropper, you're right. But they've let me get close. And we have built a mutual trust that has elevated professional relationships into personal ones. And I think a lot of that trust comes from recognizing that we are as serious about what we do as each other. So I've actually learned a lot about myself from getting close to these extraordinary people.
Fantastic. And you must have been able to take some great lessons about leadership. I know it's one of the topics you talk about from these great leaders that you can then apply to your business audiences and other organizations. I'm hoping you also pepper them with some nice stories as well.
Well, I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson managed differently when he first took over as manager of Manchester United than he did towards the end. When he had to oversee the development of a young Ryan Giggs, he could almost bully him. He could tell him to do something and Ryan would be a fool not to do it. When that youngster was Cristiano Ronaldo, he wasn't dealing with the parents as he was with Giggs. He was dealing with a super agent, and Ronaldo was a different animal because it was a different era. And I think our parents parented us differently from how we've parented and how our children will parent. So those two rollickings that I got from Fergie, I can tell you about them if you like, but he probably wouldn't have delivered them today because it is a different dressing room now and there would be a different reaction to being shouted at and screamed at.
Oh, okay. Maybe tell me over a drink. We'll keep that for another time.
They were both mistakes, I'm glad to say. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here because there would be an emerta out and, my career would have ended on the spot because you only let those kind of people down once. You only let that kind of trust down once. So thankfully, he was mistaken on both occasions. I'm still waiting for the apology, but within a week or so, I was no longer persona non grata.
Okay, so Fergie, if you're listening in, the apology has been requested, send it on a postcard. That'd be lovely. Fantastic. So, I mean, going back to the actual media, which is, so you've been both on radio and TV. You are both on radio and TV. What's the difference between talking to an audience that's with you in the room and watching and listening to them in their lounge, or a radio where you don't actually see the audience?
Well, the biggest difference between radio and television commentary is as simple as it's critical to getting it right. You're just not as important on television, and you'd better get your big head, your vain head around that before you start. When your viewers can see the action, the commentator is no more than a backing vocalist, or certainly should be. And if you don't accept that, you'll find viewers turning you down or turning you off in no time at all. Of all the advice that my late great mentor, Reg Guttridge, gave me, nothing was as vital as, and he drummed this into me over and over again, identify your audience and talk to them. It's the very essence of communication, whether you're a commentator, a teacher, or a speaker at a conference or a dinner. Now, good communication is more achievable and more scary when you can see the whites of your audience's eyes. You're then in a 3D relationship when you're in the room with them. So read the room, give them what they want. Any stand-up comic will tell you that every audience is different. And that's why the best of them, the Michael McIntyres and the Dara O'Briens, involve their audiences in their shows, making a kind of Q&A, feed off the people that have come to see them. And somehow, if you are commentating rather than speaking to millions of people that you can't see, you've got to make them feel as though you're talking to them. If there is an art to what we do, then that is probably it.
Fantastic. And I know you do a lot of mentoring for young media undergraduates and commentators. And actually, I'm sure that some of this advice would also apply maybe to young speakers too. What would be your single most important piece of advice that you would offer them?
Well, bring yourself to the party. We all have our influences, the people that we look up to and admire, both professionally and personally. I still hear and see broadcasters that maybe think, wow, but I can't be them. I can learn from them, but I mustn't try to copy them or mimic them, or I'll just be a pale imitation of them. So I say the same to undergraduates about job interviews. Be the journalist, do your research about the company that you're applying to join, try to find out about the people that you're facing who'll decide your fate, choose your words, rehearse your words. It's not cheating to practice how to make a good impression. Psychologists say that we form our first impressions about a stranger in the first 6 seconds. So make those first 6 seconds good seconds. I think that's good advice. Start a commentary well, and I find the rest usually flows, same with an interview or a speech, but be yourself, the best version of yourself for that appointment, that situation, but let the audience see you. I mean, if I'm presenting an awards lunch for the kitchen, bedroom and bathroom sector, and by the way, I have, I start by asking whoever has employed me for a full briefing about where that industry's at, what the trends are, who the movers and shakers are. I owe it to my audience to take an interest in them, to try to be on the same page as them. But then hopefully I can find parallels, make links between what they know and what I know. And that's, if you like, how those relationships with the Fergies and the Cloughys flourish. It's a kind of cross-fertilization. But the king and queen in communication are your audience, your customers.
Absolutely, absolutely brilliant. Do you know, I didn't realize it was 6 seconds. I thought it was 12. Even that's gone down. It's even shorter. That's scary.
It's shorter on Zoom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and usually the first 6 seconds on Zoom are you're on mute. You're on mute. so that's a great first impression, right? Anyway, so people are going to ask you this question, I'm sure, and so I have to ask it. But people are often asked, who would they invite to their fantasy dinner party? Now, you've met so many people, and I'm going to want some stories from some of these people as to why you'd invite them. But what would be your idea of the perfect speaking engagement and also your perfect dinner party? I want both.
Well, I mean, in both cases, one that I get something back from. I mean, if you're speaking, you're there to do a specific job, to host or to present or to entertain, but it's got to be a shared experience. If it's going to strike chords and work for everyone, I mean, we arrive at any gathering, whether it lasts for 6 or 12 seconds, social or professional, with our own mindset, our own experiences. But you know, communication is about opening and stimulating minds. All those precious hours that I've spent under the spell of sporting greats have always given me something to take away and then pass on and share with others. And I like interaction, which is actually a bit strange for a commentator and for an author, because they're largely one-way streets. You know, I do the talking, you listen, I write the words, you read. I can turn up at an event or a session and deliver my own view and version of the world for 30 or 40 minutes, and I think I can make it interesting. But it only becomes enlightening, it only becomes enlivening when others have an opportunity to challenge and change my version, when the agenda's open for discussion. So I like to involve the audience, and I would want to be at a dinner party where, unlike this interview, sorry, Maria, I'm doing all the talking. I would like to be at a dinner party with Stephen Fry or Sir David Attenborough, somebody who is just going to hold my attention. And I mean, I think in a football sense, you'd want to be with people who you feel comfortable with and who would make you smile and laugh. The great raconteurs of my business, the Ali McCoys and Andy Townsends and Martin O'Neill, that would be a good threesome to start a dinner party. But they themselves would love to be in the company of real intellect and say people who make you think and look at yourself and maybe even manage to change your mind about something.
Fantastic. If you manage to organise that dinner party, I will come and serve the drinks because that sounds pretty amazing to me. Fantastic. Wow, brilliant. So you've given us a lot to think about, and it's so clear that you have so much experience in communication, for sure. That really is a real area of expertise, and it's very sweet of you to say that you've done all the talking. I have managed to get several words in edgeways, so it's not I do expect you to do all the talking. You are the expert. You're the guest here.
I'm serious about communication. Sometimes when I go to speak to undergraduates, I think they believe that I'm just going to wax lyrical about great goals and great matches for an hour. And they're really disappointed when they find that actually the relief teacher has turned up. And in order for them to get any benefit whatsoever from any time spent in my company, particularly in that particular circumstance, an educational circumstance, they've got to learn something. But the people that really make an impact on us, I think, through these, I mean, I'm not quite sure what there is to learn yet from social media, but assessing someone's impact as an influencer solely by the number of followers they have is totally missing the point, because engagement is everything in communication. You can't reach an audience unless you get their attention. And I've spent the bulk of my broadcasting career in and around ITV. And again, more name dropping, sorry, I've got to know and work with the channel's real A-list stars, Anton Degg, Bradley Walsh, Dermot O'Leary. What do they all have in common, those four guys? Warmth. The greatest single quality in a mass communicator. All of them ooze warmth, on and off screen. You feel like you would enjoy a pint or a takeaway with them. And I'll tell you something, you would, because they are that person that looks into that black hole at the end of the camera when they're with you. It's not an act with any of them. You'd like their company if you were with them. They always make you feel like you're with them when you're watching them on TV, feel important. And that is a magic trick to have in any kind of communication. We all remember the people we meet who ask about you and your family and your friends and your business, who don't start talking about themselves. So that's a bit of a trick when you're employed to go and host something or even speak as a keynote speaker for half an hour. But if you can then engage the people that you're with, then you've got a better chance of informing them, entertaining them, questioning them in some way. And that, if as a broadcaster and as a speaker, that is the magic trick.
That's wonderful. And you also feel, with the names you mentioned there, you feel like you know them, you know, because they're in your home so often. You see them so often, you feel like you know them, and you'd probably say, oh, hi, you know, if you saw them in the street, and they'd look at you blankly, but you're convinced you know them. I love that. Engagement is everything. Absolutely love that. And I think it all comes back, you know, to understand that audience, connecting with them. It comes back to what you said at the very beginning. You need to be a bit of a research monster. You need to prepare, don't you, so that you can do that. So we've come full circle. Well done. Love that. Love that. I hope you've enjoyed yourself being on the other side.
Yeah, I asked the questions. I do. And as I say, I think the best way to learn about yourself is being in the company of inquiring minds. And all of those people that I've mentioned that you've heard of and I've met and actually got quite close to, again, one thing they all have in common. I spent a lot of time with Terry Venables, who has been one of the great pundits of television football down the years, obviously a great football coach. And he was the sort of guy who, if you had breakfast with him, he would immediately start on some tactical analysis, and your teacup would disappear down the far end of the table to engage Cafu coming forward. That's the kind of guy he was. But if you kind of humored him and just said something in order to keep the conversation going, he'd jump back at you like a prosecutor. Why'd you say that? What do you mean by that? They're the best questions in interviews. Why? What do you mean? Explain further. And if you're in the company of people who can make you think a little bit more, stretch your mind, stretch your imagination, then I think you're in the company of somebody worth spending time in the company of. And as a commentator and as a speaker, my aspirations, my ambitions are to be that person.
That is amazing. Thank you very much. You've given me lots of tips. I've made lots of notes. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And just to remind listeners that you are available to speak about leadership, communications, media, motivation and teamwork, life and times as well. We know you've got lots of lovely stories.
Name drop.
Name dropping. Yeah, we put that as a topic. And of course, hosting awards and conferences, all peppered with great stories, right? And name dropping.
Yeah. For the right moment.
Perfect. As you said, you don't put in anything that doesn't add to it. Listen, thank you so much, Clive, and thank you everybody for listening to The Speaker Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, and you can keep up with future episodes on Speakers Associates website, which is speakersassociates.com, or your favorite podcast app. And if you would like to invite Clive to speak at your next conference or event, please contact Speakers Associates in plenty of time, because he's a busy man, and you don't want to be disappointed, and buy his book, Not For Me, Clive. I will see you all next week. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.